Official report to the Interstellar Academic Council. Subject: humanity, a concerning analysis. Author: senior xenoanthropologist Kex Tal. Classification: urgent revision of previous standards required. Esteemed council members, I submit this report with great reservation, and, I must admit, a mild case of stress-induced molt. After 3 cycles of studying the species known as humans on their homeworld designated as Earth, I find myself compelled to challenge our fundamental understanding of what constitutes viable evolutionary development. To begin, I must address the Council's initial response to my preliminary findings, in which you suggested I had surely made some error in observation. I assure you, with all 6 of my hearts, that my observations are accurate. The beings we classified as improbable survivors are in fact thriving, not despite their numerous biological disadvantages, but in many cases because of them. Let me be clear: humans should not exist. Their continued survival defies every principle of evolutionary efficiency we have established over 10,000 cycles of xenobiological research. They lack proper exoskeletons, have no natural armor, possess pathetically limited sensory capabilities, and require constant maintenance just to function. Their bodies are basically water balloons, wrapped in a protein casing that tears if they so much as brush against a sharp edge. And yet, they persist. They flourish. They expand. They adapt. They overcome. It's frankly offensive. Consider this incident from my 3rd week of observation. I witnessed a human female who had sustained what should have been a devastating puncture wound from one of their primitive food preparation tools, simply wrap the injury in processed plant fiber, consume what they call an ibuprofen, and proceed to complete a full work cycle as if nothing had happened. When I inquired about this seemingly impossible feat, she replied, "Oh, it's just a flesh wound." Just a flesh wound. Council members, I ask you, what kind of species casually dismisses structural damage to their only layer of protection? The answer, I've discovered, is the same species that considers it perfectly normal to temporarily shut down consciousness for several hours every single day, rendering themselves completely vulnerable to predation, and calls this madness sleep. But perhaps most disturbing of all is their response to environmental challenges. When faced with temperatures that exceed their biological tolerances, do they seek shelter like any rational species? No. They invented what they call air conditioning and proceeded to build vast habitation units in regions that should be completely inhospitable. When confronted with bodies of water too deep to cross, did they accept these natural boundaries? Again, no. They created vessels of increasing sophistication until they could traverse their entire planet's liquid surface. Their solution to nearly every problem seems to be identify a limitation of their biology, ignore it completely, and build something to compensate for it. It's as if they took one look at the basic principles of natural selection and decided, collectively, no thank you, we'll do it ourselves. I feel compelled to note that during my time on Earth, I observed humans surviving in environments ranging from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts, from oxygen-thin mountain peaks to the crushing pressures of their deep oceans. They accomplished this not through any natural adaptation, but through what they call engineering, a process that appears to be equal parts applied science and sheer audacity. In the following sections, I will detail specific examples of human resilience that challenge our understanding of species development. However, I must first request that the Council approve an increase in my medication allowance. I find myself requiring additional anxiety suppressants just to compile this documentation. With deepest concern. Kex Tal, senior xenoanthropologist. Galactic Research Division. EPS. They have already attempted to form social bonds with our observation drones. 3 of them have been named Roomba Spot and Kevin. I don't know what a Roomba is, but they seem very attached to it. Evidence file: exhibit of physical adaptations. Subject: humanity's inexplicable biological capabilities. Classification: disturbing. Council members. After my initial overview, I feel compelled to detail specific examples of human physical capabilities that defy conventional evolutionary logic. What follows is a series of observations that have caused 3 of my colleagues to request immediate retirement and 1 to start a religion. First, let's address what humans call endurance. Running most sensible species, when confronted with a predator or threat, will either fight if properly equipped or flee to immediate safety. Humans, in their ancestral form, would simply continue running. Not quickly. Mind you, their maximum speed is laughable compared to most predatory species. No, they would just keep going. Their prey would run away. Humans would follow at what they call a light jog. The prey would hide. Humans would find tracks and continue following. The prey would run again. The humans would still be there, maintaining what they call a conversational pace. Yes, they can somehow maintain sufficient oxygen flow to talk while pursuing prey. Eventually their target would collapse from exhaustion, and the humans would finally catch up, probably discussing the weather during their final approach. This is not how predation is supposed to work. It's barely even hunting. It's more like weaponized inconvenience. But their physical aberrations don't end there. Humans exhibit a trait they call sweating. Instead of developing a proper temperature regulation system, they leak water from their skin surface to cool themselves. The first time I observed this phenomenon, I reported it as a critical medical emergency. The human in question was merely working out, voluntarily raising their body temperature through excessive movement, apparently for recreation. Speaking of temperature regulation, humans can survive in an environmental temperature range that spans over 140 of their degrees. They accomplish this through a combination of their sweating and what they call complaining. The complaining appears to serve no biological function that I can detect, yet they engage in it constantly. Their healing factor is equally baffling. When a human sustains damage to their soft external layer, they don't replace the damaged section like any sensible species. Instead, their bodies create a temporary patch made of various proteins while the original tissue somehow repairs itself. They call this process scabbing and scarring, and many of them display these repair marks proudly, using them as aids in storytelling during social gatherings. I must also address their skeletal structure. Humans have their support framework on the inside of their bodies. Inside, protected only by that ridiculously vulnerable outer layer, and yet, somehow this system works for them. They can break these internal support beams, and their bodies will literally knit the broken pieces back together. Several of my research assistants had to take medical leave after learning this fact. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human physical adaptation is their response to environmental pressures. When exposed to regular physical stress, their bodies don't break down, they get stronger. They intentionally damage their muscle fibers through repeated strain, and those fibers rebuild themselves to be more powerful. They impact their bone structures through repeated stress, and the bones become denser. They call this process working out, and many of them engage in it voluntarily, often while watching something called Netflix, which appears to be some form of digital entertainment. Yes, they have found a way to combine entertainment with intentional self-induced micro-damage for the purpose of enhancement. I recently observed a human facility called a gym where they gather in large numbers to collectively engage in this voluntary strain. The air was thick with their cooling excretions, and the humans were actually encouraging each other to continue until muscle failure. Muscle failure. They have terms for intentionally reaching their physical limits, and they celebrate it. One of my junior researchers suggested that humans might be classified as a form of biological nanite swarm, constantly rebuilding and adapting themselves. I had to prescribe him extra anxiety medication, but I cannot entirely dismiss his theory. Attached to this section, you will find detailed biochemical analyses that make even less sense than my observational notes. I particularly draw your attention to the human's production of adrenaline, a hormone that can temporarily override their physical limitations in times of crisis, allowing them to perform feats that should be structurally impossible. With increasing concern. Kextal. APS. During the compilation of this report, I observed a human child fall from a significant height, sustain what should have been serious damage to their external layer, and after a brief period of liquid expulsion from their visual organs, resume their previous activities with only a small colored adhesive strip covering the wound. They called it a band-aid. I have included several samples for the Council's analysis, though I remain skeptical of their seemingly magical properties. Evidence file Exhibit B: problem-solving capabilities. Subject: humanity's disturbing cognitive approaches. Classification: potentially hazardous to sanity. Esteemed Council members, I must preface this section by noting that my colleague Professor Yu Mei is currently under medical observation after witnessing what humans call a MacGyver marathon. She keeps muttering about paperclips and will not stop rocking back and forth. I fear her experience may be relevant to understanding the human approach to problem solving. Humans have developed what they term engineering, but I must emphasize that this word is wholly inadequate to describe their actual methodology. A more accurate term might be aggressive improvisation or perhaps chaos application. Consider this observed incident. A human's personal transport device, which they call a car, ceased functioning due to a ruptured circulation component, a belt. The logical response would be to signal for a qualified repair technician or replacement transport. Instead, this human created a temporary replacement belt out of their leg covering fabric pantyhose. Not only did this solution work, but the human seemed proud of this abomination of proper mechanical principles. This is not an isolated incident. Humans appear to have an entire category of repairs they call temporary fixes, which, disturbingly, often become permanent. When I questioned one human about this practice, they responded with what I'm told is a common earth saying, "If it's stupid, but it works." It's not stupid. I have been unable to find any logical flaw in this statement, despite spending 3 sleepless cycles trying. Their approach to tool creation defies all reasonable parameters. Most species develop specific tools for specific purposes. Humans, however, seem to operate on the principle that anything can be a tool if you hold it wrong enough. During my observation period, I witnessed humans using a writing implement to stabilize a wobbly table, a liquid container as a sound amplification device, something called a butter knife as a screwdriver, pry bar, and briefly, a musical instrument, a beverage container to create a crude communication device, their own appendages as measuring devices. They call this eyeballing it. But perhaps most concerning is their response to being told something is impossible. Most species, when informed that a task cannot be accomplished, will sensibly seek alternatives. Humans appear to take such statements as personal challenges. They call this holding my beer syndrome, referring to a ritual where one human passes their beverage to another before attempting something that violates several laws of probability. My research team documented a human student being informed that their project deadline was impossible to meet. This human proceeded to consume a beverage they call coffee, in quantities that should have been lethal, stayed awake for 72 hours straight, and completed the project while in what they termed a spite-fueled productivity fugue. The project not only met but exceeded requirements, though the human had no memory of the final 12 hours of work. Their problem-solving capabilities appear to be enhanced by what they call spike caffeine and deadlines. Our xenobiologists are still attempting to classify these seemingly supernatural forces. Of particular note is their concept of duct tape, a strongly adhesive strip that they use to repair everything from torn fabric to spacecraft components. Yes, Council members, you read that correctly. We have confirmed reports of this material being used in actual space missions. The humans have a saying: if it moves and shouldn't, use duct tape. If it doesn't move and should, use WD-40. I have included samples of both substances for analysis, though I recommend extreme caution in their handling. Even more alarming is their tendency to combine multiple temporary solutions into what they call jury rigging. This practice appears to involve solving complex problems by linking together several questionable solutions in ways that shouldn't work but somehow do. It's like watching evolution have a panic attack. One of our field researchers observed a human repair a complex atmospheric regulation system using a rubber circle from their food storage unit, adhesive from a decorative wall attachment, a primitive time-keeping device, something called a paper clip. The repair not only worked but improved the system's efficiency. The researcher had to be sedated, with mounting existential dread. Kextal. EPS. A human child just showed me how to turn this report tablet into something called a paper airplane. It flies better now. I don't understand how or why, but I can't deny the empirical evidence currently soaring around my research station. EPPS. Professor Yumi has begun collecting paper clips and rubber bands. We fear she may be attempting to MacGyver her way out of the medical facility. Security has been notified. Evidence file Exhibit C, Social Dynamics. Subject: humanity's inexplicable bonding behaviors. Classification: deeply concerning. Honorable Council members, I must inform you that Dr. Metpour, our leading xenopsychologist, has officially resigned from the observation team. Their resignation letter consisted entirely of something called reaction gifs, and the phrase "one can't even repeat it" 73 times. After reviewing their research notes on human social behavior, I understand their response. Humans, as a species, appear to have exactly two modes of social interaction: aggressive competition and aggressive cooperation. Note that I use the term aggressive deliberately in both cases. Humans do nothing halfway, including forming social bonds. Let me illustrate with a documented incident. Two humans who had never previously met were waiting for public transportation in the rain. One human offered to share their personal rain shield umbrella with the other. Within 15 minutes they had discovered 3 mutual acquaintances, shared detailed information about their respective offspring, planned a future social gathering coffee date, exchanged contact information, adopted each other into their extended social networks. This type of instant bonding should be impossible for a species with their territorial instincts, yet it happens constantly. They call it making friends and appear to do it as easily as breathing. Even more baffling is their ability to form emotional attachments to literally anything. During our study, we documented humans forming social bonds with non-sentient transportation devices, primitive food preparation machines, inanimate cleaning tools, random wild creatures, digital representations of bread. Yes, council members, you read that correctly. Humans will assign personalities to objects, give them names, and form emotional attachments to them. One of our research subjects cried real tears when their toaster ceased functioning. They held a small ceremony before replacing it. Their pack bonding capabilities are so strong that they can even override their natural territorial responses. We observed a phenomenon they call roommates, where multiple humans voluntarily share limited habitat space, often with individuals they barely know. This arrangement frequently results in either lifelong friendships or what they term passive-aggressive note wars, sometimes both simultaneously. But perhaps most disturbing is their response to perceived threats to their social units. Humans will adopt others into their family structure with absolutely no genetic basis, simply because they feel protective of them. One human in our study adopted 6 different species as pets, 2 other humans as honorary siblings, and an entire group of unrelated juveniles they met while teaching jazz band. Dr. Metpour's breaking point came during their study of human digital communication networks, specifically something called fandom. Humans will form intense social bonds with others they've never met physically, based entirely on shared appreciation for various forms of entertainment. They create elaborate alternate realities headcanons, generate their own entertainment content fanworks, and engage in complex social hierarchies, all centered around fictional narratives. The doctor's final coherent report included this observation: their pack bonding with their own imagination. Their imagination, council members. How do we even classify that? Of particular note is their adoption behavior. If a human decides that another being, regardless of species, sapience, or actual ability to consent to the relationship, needs protection, they will literally fight their own governing structures to provide that protection. We have documented cases of humans going to extraordinary lengths to care for injured wildlife, malfunctioning machinery, and even members of species traditionally considered hostile to humans. One human in our study regularly provides nutrition to local wild creatures she calls trash pandas, actually Procyon lota, a moderately intelligent scavenger species. When informed that these creatures could be dangerous, she replied, "Yes, but they're my dangerous trash babies." We are still attempting to decode the layers of meaning in this statement, with increasing bewilderment. Kextal. EPS. The humans have somehow discovered that Professor Yume is in medical care. They have organized something called a Get Well Soon card drive and are flooding our facility with colorful paper messages, despite having never met the professor. Several messages include cartoon representations of paperclips with smiling faces drawn on them. EPPS. 3 humans just tried to adopt our security drone. They've named it Blinky and are lobbying for it to receive holiday pay. I don't even know where to begin filing a report about this. Emergency addendum to previous report. Subject: the incident. Classification: urgent traumatic. Esteemed council members, I am submitting this portion of my report from what humans call a pillow fort in the station's recreation area. The humans built it for me after what they're calling the Great Coffee Maker Catastrophe of Friday. I find its enclosed space somewhat comforting as I attempt to process recent events. It began as many human-related incidents apparently do, with a series of events that should have been innocuous. Our station's atmospheric processing unit experienced a minor malfunction. Shortly thereafter, our backup systems failed. Finally, our emergency protocols crashed, something about a coffee maker drawing unexpected power. This should have resulted in an orderly evacuation while automated systems restored normal function. Instead, it became a demonstration of everything I have been trying to warn you about regarding humans. The following is a real-time transcript from my personal recorder, with relevant annotations. 0900 atmospheric systems failing. Emergency protocols initiated. Human research subjects directed to evacuation points. 0905 humans refuse to evacuate. Quote, pretty sure we can fix this, begin prayer cycle. 0907 human engineer Torres accessed atmospheric control panel using something called a hairpin security protocols bypassed with concerning ease. 0910 human scientists Chen and Rodriguez analyzing system readouts using what they call back-of-the-envelope calculations. The envelope in question appeared to have originally contained their morning nutrition. 0912 human maintenance worker Cooper retrofitting coffee maker parts to boost the signal to backup systems. When questioned about their qualifications, responded, I watched a YouTube video about this once. 0915 human research assistant Martinez coordinating with station's cleaning robots to, quote, MacGyver the hell out of this situation. Professor Yu Me would be proud, horrified. 0917 discovered source of power drain. Coffee maker had achieved partial sentience due to exposure to leaked atmospheric processing chemicals. Humans responded by attempting to communicate with it. Of course they did. 0920 coffee maker apparently lonely. Humans singing to it while rewiring atmospheric controls. Song appears to be about caffeine addiction. Morale oddly improving. 0923 human Dr. Patel calculating power redistribution requirements on their arm using borrowed medical marker. Their mathematics appears to extend onto maintenance worker Cooper's face. 0925 humans had named the semi-sentient coffee maker Brewster. They're now emotionally invested in its survival. Situation has somehow become more complicated. 0927 engineering team consisting of 3 humans with allegedly relevant degrees and 1 human who reads a lot of sci-fi proposing solution that violates several laws of thermodynamics. 0930 solution implementing. Brewing equipment merged with atmospheric processors using modified cleaning robot parts, 3 rubber bands, something called a Leatherman tool, and what I'm told is the power of friendship. 0932 systems stabilizing. Coffee maker has been successfully integrated into station's auxiliary processes. It now helps regulate oxygen levels while continuing to produce beverages. Humans celebrating. Someone mentioned getting it a little hat. 0935 situation resolved. Humans insisting on group celebration activity called high fives, unable to refuse due to their enthusiasm. My hand hurts. In conclusion, Council members, what should have been a catastrophic system failure instead became a demonstration of everything I've been documenting. The humans refused to accept a no-win scenario, applied multiple impossible solutions simultaneously, formed emotional bonds with malfunctioning equipment, created a working solution from clearly incompatible parts, somehow improved overall system efficiency in the process. Even more disturbingly, they seem to view the entire incident as entertainment. They've already added it to their collection of funny stories and have begun referring to themselves as Brewster's parents, with trembling appendages. Kex Tal. EPS. The coffee maker now releases a small amount of steam in a pattern that resembles a heart shape when humans approach it. They're delighted. I'm terrified. EPPS. Engineering has submitted a formal request to classify Brewster as station personnel and provide it with employee benefits. I'm afraid to ask what paid vacation means for a coffee maker. Final report summary and recommendations. Subject humanity classification update. Classification surrender to the inevitable. Honorable Council members. After the events detailed in my previous reports, and particularly following what station personnel are now calling the Great Coffee Maker Transcendence, I find myself compelled to submit the following recommendations regarding humanity's classification in the Galactic Database. Current classification: improbable survivors, minimal threat level, mostly harmless. Proposed classification: oh no, they recoming, maximum anxiety level, mostly harmless, but that somehow makes it worse. My reasoning is as follows. 1. Humanity's continued existence is not, as previously theorized, a statistical anomaly or cosmic clerical error. They have survived and thrived precisely because they are, to use their own terminology, a hot mess. Their apparent disadvantages are, in fact, their greatest strengths. 2. Their biological limitations have driven them to develop solutions that no sensible species would ever consider. They don't adapt to their environment, they adapt their environment to themselves with a determination that borders on spite. 3. Their problem-solving methodology can best be described as aggressive pattern recognition with a side of chaos. They will literally try anything. The fact that they survive their own solutions is perhaps the most terrifying thing about them. 4. Their social structures operate on principles that defy conventional xenosociological analysis. They will form emotional bonds with anything that exists and several things that don't. This includes, as of last Tuesday, a semi-sentient coffee maker that now helps run our research station and has been invited to Martinez's wedding. I must also address the growing influence of humanity on our own research staff. Professor Yu Mi has emerged from medical care and is now teaching the cleaning robots to play something called rock, paper, scissors. Dr. Metpour has returned to work but communicates exclusively through memes. 3 of our junior researchers have started a DII engineering club and are attempting to rebuild a food synthesizer using spare parts and the power of positive thinking. Our security chief has begun naming the surveillance drones and giving them individual performance reviews. Furthermore, I must report that I myself have been affected. Yesterday, I caught myself patting a malfunctioning data terminal and telling it everything will be okay. The terminal resumed functioning. I have no explanation for this. Therefore, I recommend the following courses of action. 1. Accept that humanity will eventually spread throughout the galaxy, not through military might or technological superiority, but through sheer stubborn creativity and the inexplicable ability to make friends with everything they encounter. 2. Begin preparation for the inevitable integration of human life hacks into galactic standard procedures. I suggest starting with their concept of duct tape, as it appears to be central to their engineering philosophy. 3. Update all first contact protocols to include guidelines for what to do when humans attempt to pet dangerous predators, adopt hostile AI, or try to feed snacks to black holes. 4. Establish a new research division dedicated to understanding how humans can simultaneously be the most terrifying and endearing species in known space. Final personal notes. I have spent 3 cycles studying humanity. In that time, I have watched them defy death, physics, and basic common sense with equal enthusiasm. I have seen them solve problems that shouldn't exist with solutions that shouldn't work. I have witnessed them form friendships with beings that shouldn't be capable of friendship. And now, sitting in this pillow fort they built me after I had what they called a perfectly understandable breakdown, drinking something they call hot chocolate, which they assured me is safe for my species, despite having no way to know that, I have come to a profound conclusion. Humanity doesn't survive, despite being a mess of contradictions and improbabilities. They survive because of it. They have turned chaos into an art form and improbability into a lifestyle. They are, as they say, living their best life. And the universe has apparently decided to just go along with it. With newfound respect and persistent anxiety. Kex Tal, Senior Xenoanthropologist, Galactic Research Division. P.S. Brewster the coffee maker just made me the perfect cup of my favorite morning beverage. I didn't even know it had been programmed for my species' biochemistry. The humans are denying any involvement and saying Brewster just gets people. I'm choosing not to investigate further. P.S. The humans have started a petition to make me an honorary human. I'm both touched and terrified. Much like humanity itself, I suppose.